Spider-Man pre-releases this weekend. Let's jump in and let's talk about a couple of commons and uncommons to keep a lookout for in your sealed pool to help you figure out, should you play those colors this weekend? Let's get to it. All right, if this is the first time you've joined us here for one of our pre-release preps, we're going to talk about a couple of cards, commons and uncommons, to keep an eye out for that I think can help to strengthen the colors that potentially you'll have in your sealed pre-release packs. Now, I have to say this, I am moderately excited for this set. I have taken a look through all of the cards. I think there's some cool mechanics here. There's some stuff that I don't like to make a judgment until I get a chance to play with it. And in a limited environment, some of that stuff ends up being a little bit better and sometimes a little bit worse than we anticipate. I also know that this set is a little bit on rocky ground, at least from what I have seen on the old interwebs. I am a Spider-Man fan, so I will say that up front. Not a huge fan, but I do like Marvel. Spider-Man is kind of a childhood favorite character. Not a comic book reader, but I did grow up, with a Spider-Man. So I will say that up front. I am really interested to see how the limited environment is going to work, especially this weekend at pre-release. I'm also really interested to see how this pick 2 draft thing is going to go. And one thing that I will note, as I kind of was taking a look through these cards and have a few things to call out, is that I also kind of kept in mind that this is a smaller set. And that can both be good sometimes and also be not so good in different variations of that. I will simply say that certain power levels of certain cards, especially duplicates of those cards, not that you will anticipate to see a ton of those, but when the sealed pool and the pool of cards is smaller, there is a few things that might show up a little bit more often. I think this is going to be more applicable to draft, but if you do get a couple of these cards and some duplicates of some of them, you may want to strongly consider going into these colors. So I'm trying to call out a handful of cards here that I thought were interesting or are typically just very, very good effects. Certainly pre-release, it's meant to have fun, go enjoy the cards, go have some fun, get down to your local game store, assuming the price is reasonable, of course, and just enjoy the environment. I know I'll be doing that this weekend, checking out some of these things, and again, testing out to see how some of these new abilities and new keywords and all that stuff end up working. So very excited. Let's get into it here. I have a couple of cards in each of the colors, and then we'll talk about a couple of multicolored cards. Starting off with white here, in uncommon, one in a white, we have Flash Thompson, Spider-Fan. He can flash in, which is very appropriate. Good flavor theme there. When Flash Thompsons enter, you can choose one or both, tap target creature and untap target creature. Here's why I like this. A couple of different variations. First and foremost, just a 2-mana 2/2 with Flash in white, pre-post combat or pre-combat especially, very, very good. Untap a blocker, tap down one of their creatures. This can help to kind of stall out board parity, put some power and toughness on the board as well. I like that a ton. Interestingly, also, there is a lot that goes into with the web slinging mechanic, right? The ability to return a tapped permanent or tapped creature, I think it is, tapped creature, back to your hand in order to cast something. This is a great enabler of that, right? So you have the ability to tap any target creature and untap any target creature. So you can even tap one of your own to be able to then play something else, untap a different creature after you've attacked. There is a lot of possibilities with this card. So big fan of this. I think this is going to be one of the better uncommons, in my opinion, especially if you are doing the web slinging thing. All right, shifting over from that, we have Spectacular Tactics, 1 and a white for a common instant, which says choose one. Put a 1/1 counter target creature you control against hexproof until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. I have always been a big fan of kind of modal or modular spells, and this is another one. It's a protection effect, powered up behind with a destroy effect. Both of those things in the right scenario can be great. You can essentially deflect off a removal spell or a combat trick potentially. The 1/1 counter isn't nothing either, so get some power and toughness on your creature that'll stick around after this spell, and or just use this in the right scenario to end up killing a creature, maybe pushing in that last bit of damage. I love cards like this. I love the ability to go and again have multiple modes. So keep an eye out, especially at common. I think this is going to be a pretty good little combat slash remove trick for you to keep your eyes out for. Okay, coming in at blue here, we have Spider Bite Web Warden, which is a generic and a blue for an uncommon 2/2. When it enters, return up to one target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. There is a lot of stuff that kicks in. I said kicks in because I saw kicker. That comes in, has enters effects that is going to be really good. There's a lot of stuff that you want to be able to return as well. And this is non-land permanent. So again, you can use this as a tempo play. You can use this on your side to get another good enters effect. You can, essentially get a creature out of the way or something. Again, non-land permanent is kind of the key here that we don't always typically see in an effect like this, right? A lot of times it's specifically creature or non-creature permanent. And so this being a non-land permanent, perfect. I really like this. Plus you get a 2/2 that, again, maybe you can attack, you web sling from. Pretty good here, and something to keep an eye out. All right, next up we have Unstable Experiment. One generic and a blue for a common instant that says target player draws a card. Then up to one target creature you control connives. Draw a card, then discard a card. If you discarded a non-land card, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. Few reasons I like this. This is drawing 2 cards for 2 mana. Straight up, from that perspective, that's pretty good. You would take that. In addition to that, if you are in anything that has the Mayhem mechanic, mostly red and black, but a lot of the villains support that mechanic in this, you can then be pitching something to then utilize, to then cast that for its Mayhem cost, which can give you another reduction. So there's a lot of really good synergies here with this card. In addition to that, being able to get some additional power and toughness on your creature that sticks around for simply 2 mana at instant speed is also quite good. So in a weird way, you can almost use this as a combat trick. Again, depending on what you have with Mayhem that you can utilize, this feels pretty good. Even if you're not in the colors, because blue kind of has this weird space, at least from what I feel like, probably more supportive of the hero creatures than it is of the villain creatures. Even if you're in that perspective or have that kind of going on for your deck, being able to draw 2 cards, pretty good, right? And it's up to, so maybe you don't have anything that you want to discard, or maybe you're out of cards and you just need to refill a little bit. This still ends up being a pretty decent card draw effect and has some good utility on top of it. Let's go over and talk about Whoosh, which is one generic and a blue for an instant at common rarity that has a kicker for an additional 1 generic and a blue. It says return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This spell was kicked. Draw a card. So first and foremost, again, being able to kick something back, non-land permanent, especially important. For simply 2 mana, very good. This can be something to help blow out and as a combat trick. Make sure that you stabilize or can get some tempo play going here in blue. Push in some damage potentially before blockers are declared. There's lots of utilities for this. Kick off an equipment to be able to get a good trade. Plenty of opportunities for this. What I also like, though, is late game. A lot of times these spells are still good, but a lot of times they lose a little bit of their luster, especially in like a board stall where things are really mucked up. This is nice because you can kick something back and replace this card as well. Help give you a little bit of that card advantage as you're moving forward. So I really like the effect like this. And again, the additional kicker on top of this makes this a spell that will never really truly feel dead in your hand, which I do like. All right, moving down to black, we have Swarm Being of Bees, 2 generic and a swamp for a legendary creature insect villain at common rarity that has some really great keywords. Flash, flying, and it's 2/2 and also Mayhem. I chatted a little bit about this as we were talking about Unstable Experiment, but this is a new keyword. It says you may cast this card from your graveyard for its Mayhem cost. If you discarded it this turn, timing rules still apply. Now, there are plenty of cards that make use of this mechanic. Mostly, I think it's all villains. It's a villain mechanic. But a lot of times, they're creatures that have timing restrictions, right? You can only play them at sorcery speed, so on and so forth. The best part about this and why it was a standout for me is it has flash. So imagine using Unstable Experiment, being able to pop up a creature at instant speed, maybe get a profitable trade there, and then also being able to bring in an additional blocker by discarding this and then playing it at instant speed. I think this creature is fantastic. If you end up running a lot of Mayhem type synergies, discard that kind of stuff. People, I think, are going to get caught off guard by this card pretty quickly. And again, you're putting not only a 2/2 body into play for a single mana, it also has flying, which is pretty good. So if you need some evasion to get in some damage, you're going to really enjoy this one. Keep a close eye out for this card. I think it's going to be one of the better commons in the set, in my opinion. All right, and then we have Spot's Portal, which is 2 generic and a swamp for an instant at uncommon rarity. It says put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. You lose 2 life unless you control a villain. Here's what's interesting. Again, a lot of times we're kicking these types of cards back. We're putting permanents back or creatures back and giving our opponents the choice of top or bottom. We saw Lost in Space from Edge of Eternities doing this for 3 generic and a blue. Now that it was at common rarity, I believe, this being at uncommon, costed a little bit cheaper, but does not give our opponent the opportunity to decide where it goes. This is super, super impactful. If you're about to take lethal damage, for instance, from a big creature, maybe they've pumped something up, this puts it on the bottom. This removes that completely, that effect. And they're just probably not going to see that card again unless they're shuffling their deck up. So I like this a lot. Black is going to have the opportunity to have a ton of villains. So I don't think the 2 life lost here is really bad at all. If you do have to pay that, of course, it is part of it. And it kind of is what it is, right? Consider taking 2 versus probably what you're playing this against, which is either pumping up a bunch of other stuff, you know, prior to combat, you're casting this, or in combat, maybe you're doing this. You can use this as an offensive trick as well. Get a double block or triple block and have this get something out of the way, essentially permanently, right? This is pretty much as good as any normal kind of kill spell, and putting it on the bottom of the deck in some instances may actually be better because then it doesn't become a graveyard resource. So keep an eye out for this one. If you're looking to fill up your pool of removal, definitely consider this. And again, don't let 2 life lost scare you away from using what I think is a pretty good removal spell. All right, jumping up to red here, we have Romantic Rendezvous, obviously one of the kind of interesting and key scenes from Spider-Man. For 1 generic and a red, we have a sorcery for at common, that is discard a card, then draw 2 cards. I think this is going to be a set that is going to also need you to fill your hand up. We saw that a lot with Edge of Eternities. Card advantage ended up being, in my opinion, pretty important for that. And I think with this pick 2 format, especially more so for draft, maybe than sealed, but always in sealed when you can get some card advantage, feels pretty good. I like this a lot. It's very simple. Discard a card, draw 2 cards. There's no limitations on the card that you're getting rid of. The only thing that stinks a little bit is obviously you have to do this at sorcery speed, but if you can parlay that into something else, I don't ever see this being a dead card in your hand. So this is just one of those generically good cards that you should consider putting into your deck because, again, at some point in the match, you're probably going to draw something that you don't need. Red, black especially does a pretty decent job of some graveyard recursion or some other things. Plus, with the Mayhem mechanic, you really are not going to be disappointed at discarding that card. You can follow that up. We just talked about the Swarm of Bees, right? If you're able to discard that for 3 mana, you can draw 2 cards and play a 2/2. That seems like really good, and they're both commons on top of that. So keep that in mind. I think this is going to be pretty good and really help to fuel up some of the synergies with some of the keywords that we have in the set. Then we have Superior Foes of Spider-Man, 2 generic and a red creature human rogue villain at uncommon, which has trample. It's a 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell with mana 4 or greater, you may exile a top card of your library. If you do, you may play that card until you exile another card with this creature. Here's why I like this a whole lot. The restriction to this ability, where you're getting to exile something and then play it later, is typically related to end of turn or end of your next turn. That limitation is gone. So if you do end up ripping something big, as long as you are smart with what you're playing and how you're following that up, then you're still going to be able to play this card. I think this is going to be a really good engine for some additional value. If you do have some top end spells, typically in sealed and in draft, you're going to want to curve up anyways. I could see a really, really nice turn of playing this on 3, curving out on 4, playing like a removal spell or another decent sized creature, getting something off the top, maybe a land that you can play and or another spell that you can then cast and go from that point. So I really like this. Plus, 3/3 trampling 3/4/3 is a really good stat line in my opinion, and I think 3 damage is going to be a pretty key marker here. I always like to take a look and see kind of how are the commons and uncommons based, and I think 3 damage is going to push through quite a bit of different creatures. Granted, there will be plenty that are bigger, but this is going to be a pretty good body for a simple 3 mana. You're getting a lot here with just 3 mana. This was a 3/3 trample for 3. Probably consider playing it at for some of your creatures, right? And the ability to get some additional card advantage off of this, I think, is a no-brainer. All right, jumping down to green here, we have Damage Control Crew, which feels really interesting, but I love the art. It's a guy holding one of the pumpkin bombs. It's a 3 generic and a green for a creature human citizen at uncommon rarity that says when this creature enters, choose 1. You have Repair, return target card with mana value 4 or greater from your graveyard to your hand. I really like, or Impound, which is exile target artifact or enchantment. And again, it's on a body of a 3/3 human citizen. Here's why I like this. Return target card with mana value 4 or greater. So this ends up being quite good. Anytime we see any of these recursion effects, especially when they don't limit to certain types of permanents and are really open to any card. Now, obviously, this still has a restriction of mana value 4 or greater, but in a sealed pool, and even in draft, you're going to have those cards, right? You play a 5 mana big creature or spell that ends up doing something that you like. There's some good removal here at 4 mana as well inside the set, so being able to recur that back is awesome. If that isn't something that you can take advantage of, you're still putting a 3/3 onto the battlefield for 4 and exiling an artifact or enchantment. I don't see as many impactful artifacts and enchantments in this set, but there are certainly some, and some things that you would want to be able to get rid of. I like, again, having that modularity, the ability to have different effects on this, and I just don't ever feel like there's going to be a point where you play this and just don't have some way to get some value out of it, right? Whether that be returning or getting rid of something that's going to do some damage to you, or is having an impact on the board state. I like this card a whole lot. Guy in the chair. I had to just bring this one up, okay? If you haven't seen this, it's a Human Advisor for 2 generic and a green at common rarity. It's a 2/3 that says tap, add 1 mana of any color. So here's one of your kind of mana ramp creatures. Very few in the set, I might add. It also has web support for 3 mana, and you tap it, you put a 1/1 counter on target spider. Activate only as a sorcery. We've seen this type of effect before. Usually it varies in the amount of mana that has to be paid for it. This is restrictive to spiders, but because we're in the Spider-Man set, there are plenty of those, especially in green. Green does support quite a few of your heroes, and the fact that this is a mana rock in and of itself, or mana creature, mana dork, that gives you the ability to do that. This is an easy card for you to bring in for pretty much any color that you're going to be playing, as long as, again, you're playing green. And just some extra utility, right? Once you kind of ramp up and do what you need to do in the early game, if this guy is still sitting there in his chair and you have some spiders in your deck, you're going to be able to get some additional value. Now, it is only at sorcery speed, so do keep that in mind. But if you're able to put it on one of your Spider-Man heroes, for instance, and get them buffed up a little bit, I do think that is going to be a good long-term play for you. I also like the body here, a 2/3, good blocker early. We've seen some other similar type, mana dorks in the past that have been statted similarly. Usually less power is interesting. So 2 mana or 2 power and 3 toughness is going to be a little hard to get through, especially in the early game. So this will probably stick around and actually get you some value, which is nice. Certainly that's what you want to see from a card like this. And then finally in green here, we have Supportive Parents, 2 generic and a green for a creature human citizen at uncommon rarity. It says tap 2 untapped creatures you control, add 1 mana of any color for a 3/3. Here's why I like this. The ability to add mana by tapping things is fine. It's good. You're going to find use cases for it. It's going to help you to play that additional spell, get some things ramped up. There are plenty of low-cost creatures here, so I could see pretty easily like a 1-2-3 curve into this where you're getting some additional mana. More importantly than that, though, tapping things down becomes huge for web slinging, right? So if you are in green and you're supporting any of your heroes, and they have web slinging, you're going to want to be able to do this. Being able to tap those things down, add mana to then use for the web slinging cost by bringing that creature back to your hand is huge. I can see some pretty nuts draws with a card like this where you're supporting a good amount of web slinging, where you're playing one again of your rares, for instance, that can come in, or one of your mythics that could come in with a good web slinging cost. Get something down a whole lot earlier than maybe you normally would, and not put your creatures at risk by having to attack in order to do that. That's why this is so impactful. It's not like Edge of Eternities, where we have spacecraft that you can, station up and just essentially kind of tap for free. This is one of the few ways to be able to do that and not put them at risk for combat damage or some other thing that might end up getting them killed. So keep an eye out for this, especially if you have, I could see some pretty cool green decks where you have supportive parents, guy in the chair. These are things that you're going to be able to, again, tap to add the value and then web sling away, which is pretty sweet. Okay, calling out a couple of multicolored cards. There is not a ton of these in the set. Mostly are up at the rare or higher rarity, so do keep that in mind. But in typical fashion, we saw this kind of like from Edge of Eternities. When these multicolored sections are somewhat narrow, a lot of times what you end up seeing is that these cards end up being pretty good. So if I didn't call out something in a color combination that you're in, but it is multicolored, give it another look, because there are quite a few good ones. They usually match up very well to the theme of what those colors are trying to do. But I called a couple out, here that I just really do enjoy, and I think are worth kind of an extra look and maybe really help you to push you into that color pairing, especially if you have some good support in those colors. Also, these kind of split mana cost cards also then allow them to be put in either of those colors of those decks, which is also pretty nice. So you're less reliant on that as a restriction, and instead I think it opens up the possibility. So if you're kind of like a black-green deck, for instance, you can still run something like a Pumpkin Bombardment because it can be paid with either of those. So let's get into it. Let's talk about a few of these. All right, as I said, Pumpkin Bombardment being the first. It is a sorcery for either 1 black or 1 red at common. It says an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card, or pay 2. Pumpkin Bombardment deals 3 damage to target creature. So this is a removal spell, 3 damage, like I said. 3 toughness is kind of a good sweet spot for a lot of the cards in this set. It's going to remove a whole lot, especially at the common and uncommon rarity for creatures, which you're going to see pretty consistently. What I like about this, again, is with the Mayhem mechanic, red and black want to do this. They have the villains. They want to discard cards. So again, imagine for 2 mana, being able to play a Pumpkin Bombardment, either for a black or a red, discarding the Swarm of Bees again, and mayheming that creature in for an additional swamp. That is really good. And you're killing something, deal 3 damage to a creature. Maybe it's post-combat, you've got some, a blocker that you're trying to get out of the way. You can find some interesting ways to use this, and then, again, partner it up with the ability to discard that card and play it later. I like this a lot. I really do, and I think this is going to be a really good utility spell, again, for trying to get your Mayhem up and running. So keep an eye out for this, and, like I said, good removal spell. Even if you... I don't know if I would really want to play this if I had to pay it for 3. 3 mana for 3 damage. Doesn't feel great, but again, if you can utilize the discard mechanic here, I think this is an easy winner in a deck. Next, we're going to Shriek Troublemaker, 2 and either a black or a red for a legendary creature mutant villain at uncommon rarity. It says at the beginning of your main phase, you may discard a card. Again, we're mayheming here. When you do, target creature can't block this turn. Then it has Sonic Blast. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, Shriek deals 1 damage to that player. Again, play this, beginning of your first main phase, you're discarding something, which is just going to fuel Mayhem. If you are in a Mayhem deck, if you get some of the good rares that have it, you get a couple of good villains in black and red that have this ability, and you have this card in your deck, play it. It is going to fuel those things out. 2/3 body for 3, not terrible, not great. When things die, it deals the damage. That ping damage usually is pretty impactful, especially if you keep this on the battlefield for a little while. So it just turns into like a decent blocker, and then hopefully pings for some damage. If you're able to kind of pair it up with black and red, which is great at removing creatures and killing them, then you're going to do just fine with this. And it's whenever creature and opponent dies, it's dealing that damage. So keep that in mind. But essentially a free discard. It's also a May ability, which is also really, really nice. And it's making creatures unblock. Creature can't block, so it's going to help you to kind of push through, get combat in your favor. I like this card a lot. I'm focusing a lot on Mayhem in this video, but I do think, comparative to Web Slinging, I think Mayhem has a lot more capability of being triggered relatively easily, and I think that's nice, especially if you can build around it. Me personally, for this pre-release this weekend, I am super hopeful to be able to get a couple of the cool red-black villains or Mayhem villains and find some opportunities, because I just think their decreases and being able to bring them in is going to be pretty impactful. I think it's going to be one of the stronger mechanics. Again, I like web slinging. It's neat, but trying to get things tapped down, especially in like stalled board states or like in white and blue, when you don't necessarily always have the creatures that can punch in that damage, you're going to kind of rely on evasive threats to be able to do that. I think Mayhem, built right, is going to have a little bit easier time of being triggered. Next, we'll move on to Spider Manifestation. First and foremost, I love this art. It gives me a little bit of Dustmourn vibes, which is cool. I really like Dustmourn personally. But Spider Manifestation, 1 generic and either a red or a green for a creature spider avatar. At common rarity reach, tap to add a green or a red. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, untap this creature, and it's a 2/2. This is just a very, very solid again, another mana dork for us. And the fact that you can cast something, get some additional value to untap this, you're able to tap this down again for web slinging. Green is really going to make good use of that as well, in my opinion. So keep an eye out for this. I think this is a great utility creature if you're in the colors. Reach 2/2 is also not bad, right? There is going to be quite a bit of flying and evasive creatures that you're going to want to have some options for. And while this isn't the greatest of all, this is pretty good. 2/2 for 2 with reach, decent stat line, and the ability to help you ramp up is pretty nice. All right, and then last we have Wraith Vicious Vigilante. 1 generic, a white and a blue for a legendary creature human detective hero. That's a lot. At uncommon rarity, it's a 1/1 double striker. Fear gas, it can't be blocked. Okay. There's some pretty good synergies for putting some 1/1 counters. We talked about Spectacular Tactics, being able to put some counters on this. The fact that this is just an unblocked 1/1, very nice. Okay, so if you're able to pump this up, there's not a ton of equipment, there's not a ton of that, but there are some good pump effects, there are some good counter synergies as well, as you would expect. So being able to get some value out of this is nice. The other thing that I think this is also going to shine in is being able to attack with it, deal a few points of damage, and web sling off of it. It's not the cheapest of creature, but at 3 mana, you can do that, return this, get something else in impactful on turn 4 or 5. Once you have some mana up, I think that's going to be pretty good. This is going to have to be one of those creatures, I think, that does get answered, right? Double striking for 2, and if you can make it any bigger at any point, it's just pretty well lethal, right? So keep that in mind. I do like this a lot. Again, if you're in that kind of blue, white, counters type synergies, or have some of the ability to get some effects off of combat damage, I think this creature is going to be pretty dang good. Okay, and then I have just one colorless card to talk about here, and then one kind of final mention to wrap up this video. Noose Helicopter, which is 3 generic artifact creature construct at common rarity. Flying, when this creature enters, create a 1/1 green and white human citizen creature token, and it's a 1/1. Now 3 mana for a flying 1/1, it's not that great. When it enters, you do make another 1/1. So you're essentially getting 2 power, 2 toughness. A little bit of that is evasive. Here's why I like this so much. It's got flying, and it's evasive. So you're going to very easily be able to tap this down again to be able to return it to your hand for web slinging, and then playing it again is going to essentially, to a certain extent, be recurable for your ability to get additional power and toughness and kind of go wide strategy for this. Is this card great? Absolutely not. But if you are in that and you're looking for a good 3-drop to help fill up your curve, if you need some creatures, this is essentially going to do that for you. And again, if you have some good web slinging mechanic to take use of this, you're going to want some flyers and some evasive creatures to be able to tap down, get some damage in without fear of them being killed, and then have something to return. And I do like that it is a generic 3/3 as an artifact creature construct, because again, it means that a lot of decks can play this, just slot this in if they need that final thing, or again, they have some good support, but just don't quite have the creatures to fill that, and you don't want to really have to rely on that. The fact that it also has it when it enters is pretty nice. So like we talked about Spider Bite, right? Return up to 1 target non-land permanent. So if you really need to, you can bounce this back, then play it again and get that additional 1/1 token. So I'm going to finish up by saying I'm pretty excited for the set. I'm excited to see how these mechanics are going to work. I'm excited to kind of really play with Mayhem and with web slinging to see how do the board states feel, especially in kind of more mid-rangey games. I will finish by saying this set is way more supported for multicolor lands. There's a good series of them. There's some at rare and some at, I believe it's either common or uncommon. I have to take a look back. But it is definitely going to support some of these color combos. So in your sealed deck, you won't have as much to worry about. But if you start to get into draft, do kind of keep that in mind, that I think as you kind of get into your color pairs, be on the lookout for some of those lands to help support that, because there are not a ton. Again, outside of green, there are not a ton of, mana dorks or mana ramp type cards that I think those lands are going to end up being pretty important. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully some cool things for you to take a look at. Again, enjoy pre-release, and whenever the set does release here, in this video, it'll be like 2 weeks or so. When it does release and finally come to MTG Arena, we'll be jumping into it. We also do a whole lot of pack openings, so we do have some of the Spider-Man set on its way, hopefully to get delivered, relatively quickly once the set releases. We do pack openings every Wednesday, so if you want to check that out, be sure to stick around. Hit that like and subscribe button for us. We're on the road to 1,000 subs, our first big channel milestone. And we do a whole bunch of MTG Arena content, a whole bunch of pack openings, whole bunch of Commander stuff as well, so be sure to stick around. We'd love your support. But hopefully you found this helpful. Have fun at pre-release, and enjoy the new Spider-Man set. Thanks for watching. Peace.